I'm attempting to completely transform this island in hardcore Minecraft. To get closer to that goal, I'll be building an entire custom forest, some of my most detailed houses ever, and tons of smaller details to bring as much life to the area as possible. If you didn't know already, Minecraft recently introduced 2 new types of chickens, and I'd absolutely love to add them to our base. So let's build a coop behind our barn. All we need to do is just chop down a few trees and flatten the ground a bit to make room for it. And now that we have some space, let's get straight to building. I first built a small sheltered area so the chickens can stay dry if it's raining, and then I made a larger area for them to roam around using spruce and oak trapdoors. And because I can't help myself, let's build some custom trees to further integrate the build into the environment. The coop is looking pretty cozy now, but there's still just one final detail I want to add, which means taking a trip to a warm ocean. The block I'm after is horn coral, but luckily there's a ton down here, so I was able to gather some in no time. With that in hand, I headed back to the coop. If we waterlog some spruce slabs, we can place the coral down without it dying, and now it looks like some comfy nests for the chickens. Speaking of chickens, we still need to actually add some to the build. But before we do that, I think it's finally time to tackle something I've been procrastinating for nearly 500 in-game days: defeating the Ender Dragon. In preparation, I made my way into the Nether and went over to a warped forest so that I could kill some Endermen for Ender Pearls. After that, I went over to a nearby fortress and farmed some blaze to get some rods. And since I have looting 3 on my sword, I got a bunch in no time. With both of those items in hand, I went home and crafted a few Eyes of Ender. I then took a trip over to our barn, bred all the cows, and unalived some to get some steak since I'm almost completely out of food. Last but not least, I crafted a couple golden apples. And then I made some rockets since I hope to find an elytra after defeating the dragon. Anyways, let's finally throw an Eye of Ender and start locating the stronghold. I kept following the eyes until eventually one went straight underground, and I took that as my cue to start digging. Sure enough, I soon ran into the stronghold. While searching for the end portal, I stumbled upon a library where I found an eye armor trim, so that was a pretty cool find. And after a bit more exploring, I finally found the end portal. The nerves are getting to me a bit, but let's just activate the portal and head inside. My biggest fear is getting launched into the void, but let's not think about that and instead take out all of the crystals. With all of those taken care of, we can start attacking the dragon. I used both my bow and sword to deal damage, and before I knew it, the battle was already over. And I'm feeling pretty happy since this is my first time defeating the dragon in hardcore. After collecting all of the XP, I took a minute to grab the dragon egg since I think it's pretty much mandatory that we display it in our base. My next goal is to find an end city so that we can get an elytra and also some shulker shells, so let's head into the end gateway, which will transport us to the outer end islands. And I spotted a city almost right away, so I began making my way over to it. Easier said than done though, since the huge gaps between the islands make it pretty challenging. And after a super sketchy pearl, which almost went straight into the void, I was feeling pretty nervous. For larger gaps, I had no choice but to bridge across, and let me tell you, this is infinitely scarier than fighting the dragon. My heart is racing. That was a little nerve-wracking to say the least, but we finally arrived at the end city. Sadly, this one doesn't have a ship, so no elytra for us yet. However, I still hunted down all of the shulkers I could find, since shulker boxes are going to make our life so much easier in this world. And as I continued to loot the structure, I also found my very first spire armor trim. I'd absolutely love to collect every armor trim in this world, so we're making great progress towards that. After looting the entire city, I made my way over to a second one. And this one has a ship, so we should be able to get our hands on an elytra. Sure enough, after pillaring up and making my way inside, I found what I was looking for. It's such a great feeling to finally have our hands on a nice pair of wings. While I was here, I grabbed the dragon head because, you know, why not? And then I used my brand new wings for the first time to safely glide down to the main end city. I then spent the next half hour or so looting the city, as well as a few others to get a bunch of shulker shells and any other good loot that I could get my hands on. I even found a few more elytras. It'll definitely be nice to have a few extras just in case. Once I was done exploring, I made my way back to the main end island and hopped into the portal. The credits began to roll, but this world is far from over, so instead, let's hook up another portal for quick access between our base and the fortress we found. I eventually want to build an Enderman XP farm, so it'll be worth it to take a minute now to just make an easy path for ourselves. And as much as I enjoy adventuring, it feels great to be back at our base. I spent a few minutes organizing my items, and here's a look at all the goodies we got. Pretty solid actually. Before doing anything else, let's upgrade this shelf in our storage room a bit by adding an ender chest, and I think this will also be a great spot for the dragon egg. Taking a quick visit to the villager trading hall, let's purchase some Unbreaking 3 books. Since we got a ton of XP from killing the dragon, I want to take a second to upgrade our gear. First off, let's combine the Unbreaking 3 books we just got with some mending ones I already had in storage, and then add them to a couple pairs of elytras. While we're at it, let's also put mending on our sword. And since I still have a lot of levels, we can also put Soul Speed 3 on our boots, as well as Respiration 3 on our helmet. We still need to get Swift Sneak on our leggings, but besides that, I think we have the perfect armor now. We can explore a lot easier with an elytra, so let's finally go find some of the new chickens so we can add them to our coop. Our first stop is a savanna biome to get some of the warm chicken variants. I think the easiest way to bring some back is just to get some eggs, so I lured some into a pit where we can breed them and collect all the eggs. In the meantime, we might as well chop down a bunch of acacia trees, since I'm sure we'll use them eventually. And I also spotted a huge patch of coarse dirt, so I dug that up too so we can use it for future pathways around our base. And after getting close to 3 stacks of brown eggs, I made my way back home. Using the eggs we got, I added a few of the warm chickens to our coop. It's awesome to finally have some life in here. I also want to get some of the cold chickens, so I made my way to a taiga biome next. And let's just use the same method as before and contain the chickens in a hole in the ground. I noticed a pretty cool sunken ship up in some ice spikes, so while we wait for chickens to lay some eggs, let's go check it out. I collected all of the loot and even found a buried treasure map. I couldn't resist going pirate mode for a minute, so I located the treasure and collected all of the loot there as well. With that side mission completed, I got back to work collecting as many blue eggs as I could. And while waiting for even more eggs, I cut down tons of spruce trees since I'm constantly running out whenever I want to build anything. And after getting a little over a stack of eggs, I couldn't be bothered to wait any longer, so I went back home and used the eggs to add some cold chickens to the coop. And with that, I think we can finally call this build done. There's a ton of stuff that I want to build in this video, so let's go full deforestation mode for a minute and get rid of all the trees to make room for all of the upcoming builds. It's way easier to see the area that we're working with now, and as a bonus, we've got a bunch of logs we can use for building later. And now that we can see the land, I want to get all the pathways built, but we're going to need some materials first. So I first flew around until I found an azalea tree. Once I found one, I dug underneath it and gathered up all of the rooted dirt. After that, I went home and then made a trip down into our mine to gather up some granite. And I think a couple of deposits should be more than enough. I also want to use some packed mud in the paths, so let's take a minute to harvest our wheat farm. The other material we need in order to craft packed mud is of course regular mud, so I went over to a mangrove swamp and filled an entire shulker box full of mud. That's way more than I'm actually going to need, but it'll be nice to have some extra in our storage room. And with that in hand, I went back home and crafted a few stacks of packed mud. The last thing I'm going to need is brown mushroom blocks, so I used bone meal to grow a few on top of some podzol. And for some reason, I find it really satisfying to insta-mine. We should have everything we need to build the pathways now, so I put it all into some shulker boxes to make it easier to move the items around. Before we can build the actual pathways though, we just need to dig out the ground to make room for them. Once all of the space was cleared out, I got to work placing the pathways in. I used the same block palette as the rest of our paths, and that consists of coarse dirt, regular dirt, packed mud, and rooted dirt. However, I also mixed in brown mushroom blocks, jungle planks, and mud bricks for the very first time, just to give some of the different areas more variety. And now that the pathways are in, you can hopefully see a little bit better what my vision for this new area is. With the pathways done, I finally got around to something that I've been meaning to do for a while now, and that's to expand our potato farm so it fills the space better. It really only took a few minutes, but I think it looks a lot better now. Getting back to the new region we're working on, I want to build a ton of custom trees to help bring a lush vibe to the area. In preparation, I crafted a brand new diamond hoe. After that, I went to our villager trading hall and picked up a silk touch book. I then combined it with one of the Unbreaking 3 books that we got earlier, and then I added both enchants to the hoe we just made. Now we can grow some trees, and then quickly collect all of the leaves using our hoe since it has silk touch on it. This should hopefully be a lot more convenient than going through like 1,000 pairs of shears. After collecting several stacks of spruce leaves, I moved on to gathering a bunch of oak and birch leaves from a nearby forest. That should be all the leaves we need, so next I crafted a variety of different walls to use for the tree trunks and branches. Taking a quick pit stop at our barn, I dyed the sheep green and then sheared them for their wool. I also want to decorate some of the trees with hanging roots, so I used bone meal on a rooted dirt block to make some, which I of course harvested with some shears. The last thing we should need is dark oak logs, so I spent a few minutes growing and chopping down some trees. Making use of our new shulker boxes again, we should now have all the materials we need to build a ton of custom trees. Getting straight to it, I built a birch tree next to our lighthouse, as I felt like our harbor area could use a bit more greenery. Afterwards, I built a variety of oak, spruce, and birch trees further up the hill in front of our warehouse. I did leave a section open, but you'll have to wait and see what I have planned for that. I then went crazy turbo tree building mode and made 17 more trees, pretty much creating an entire custom forest, which I think turned out super awesome. But now that we have all of the trees in place, I think it's about time to take a little break and go check in on my cats. If you don't know, this is the part of the video where I shamelessly show you my cats in the hopes that you'll give the video a like. I know it's a bit of a guilt trip, but it seriously helps out the channel more than you'd think, so thank you for taking a second to do it. I really appreciate it. Getting back to Minecraft, I want to focus on adding smaller details to really help bring this new area to life. I think a fountain of sorts could be fun, so let's craft everything we're going to need, like barrels, candles, note blocks, and a soul lantern. And I even cooked up a couple different types of glazed terracotta. With that, we have everything we need to build the fountain. I began by replacing the ground with a mixture of acacia logs, pale moss, and tuff. With that done, I made a border for the fountain using a variety of gray blocks. And then I built a cover out of dark oak. Moving inside the fountain itself, let's remove the ground and then use the glazed terracotta we made to create a really colorful design. I feel like I don't use these blocks nearly enough, but I'm glad I could incorporate them here. Next, let's fill the entire thing with water to turn it into an actual fountain. To detail the water, let's add sea grass alongside sea pickles, which will also help light up the build at night, which is pretty convenient. Let's spice up the area around the fountain by adding a couple of note blocks, and then we can create a small bench using extinguished campfires. Moving to the other side of the fountain, we can put down a few blue candles. Easier said than done though, because for some reason you can only put them down on top of full blocks, which is a little bit annoying. Anyways, I figured it out and then added another bench just to make the whole thing symmetrical. This area could use some color, and I think a few melons will work perfectly. And as I like to do, I placed a candle and a sea pickle on top of a couple of them to look like larger stems. I'm pretty happy with the fountain now, but just to help fill out the space around it, let's build some random crates and barrels. And after adding some vegetation like grass, bushes, and leaf litter, this area is feeling really cozy. Finishing the fountain has me super motivated to keep building more cool stuff in our world. So next, let's create a market stall to fill in this empty space in front of the warehouse. I went for a pretty simple design, just 4 pillars made out of barrels and logs, with a cover on top made out of jungle and oak wood. I mainly kept it simple as I really want the decorations to stand out. The final touches I added were books inside of some chiseled bookshelves, a couple of cakes, and an acacia pressure plate. To accompany our cute little market stall, let's build a seating area using cherry stairs and scaffolding. And because it's one of my favorite details right now for some reason, let's add another pressure plate on top of one of the tables. Oh yeah, I also added a hanging sign to the market stall, so if anyone has any cool name ideas, let me know and I'll add it to the sign. While I'm on the topic, I asked for name ideas for our harbor, and I got a bunch of really awesome ideas, but my favorite was Gollum's Harbor. So let's add that to the sign near the path to make it official in our world. Thanks to Ben for that epic suggestion. I couldn't help but notice the area around one of our new oak trees is looking kind of bland, so let's build a bench using extinguished campfires and spruce trapdoors to fill out the space a bit. And y'all already know how much I love adding pops of color, so let's use some of the new wildflowers to accomplish that here. And we can contrast the flowers by making some small boulders using mossy cobblestone slabs. Let's blend it all together with some greenery like moss carpet, bushes, and ferns. That only took a few minutes, but this little area is feeling so much more alive now. Let's continue adding more details like this to make our world even more immersive. We can switch this next one up a bit though by making a lamppost, which will also help mob-proof the area. Let's also add another bench because, you know, why not? And then we can tie it all together with leaf litter scattered around, as well as my favorite flower, blue orchids. And just like that, we've created another cozy detail to look at while we're running around doing stuff on our island. I don't want to go too crazy, but just to flesh out the custom forest area a bit more, let's use bone meal to add even more greenery. And I'm getting rid of most of the tall grass and flowers as I prefer a cleaner look. Flowers are nice to have though, so I did put some back in my own manicured patches. It takes a bit more time for sure, but the end result, especially when mixed with leaf litter, creates a really awesome effect, I think. I also love that the falling leaf particles are a thing now. It definitely adds a lot of life into the environment. Remember that empty patch I talked about like 5 minutes ago? Yeah, me neither. Anyways, I want to fill it in with a giant flower field. I'm going to need a ton of bone meal in order to make it though, so let's head into the nether and find a soul sand valley, which should have plenty of bone blocks. I do have a bone meal farm back at home, but honestly, it's not really that efficient, so I think this will just be faster. And I think I was right, because in no time at all, we already have over 3 stacks of bone blocks. Let's head back home and use our newly obtained bone meal to create plenty of rose bushes, as well as lilacs, which will be the main components of our flower field. And I'd also like to include some azure bluets into the mix, so I went over to a nearby flower forest to gather a whole bunch of those flowers as well. That's everything we'll need, so let's finally fill in this empty area with all of our flowers. I went with neatly maintained rows, alternating rose bushes and lilacs. To further divide up the different rows, I planted azure bluets in between them. Pretty straightforward to put together, but it brought so much life and color to the area, so I'm super happy with the result. As our civilization continues to grow, the people living here are going to need more food. So I want to build 2 new crop farms in these open, kind of triangle-looking areas. Let's start by building a wall for the first farm, just using some cobblestone. Once I was happy with the shape, I went back and swapped out some of the blocks with tuff, pale moss, and mossy cobblestone to give the entire wall some nice texture variation. With that done, I dotted oak leaves all the way around the wall to help break up all of the gray and give the build a lusher vibe. And we can enhance that even further by also adding some shortgrass and ferns. I think throwing some flowers into the mix will also help add some color, so let's scatter some of those around too. And cause I can't get enough of it right now, I also added a bit of leaf litter. The wall is looking pretty sweet now if I do say so myself, so let's finish it off by placing some glow lichen around it to help light up the area. Love how that one turned out, so let's go ahead and use the same building techniques to create a second wall on the adjacent piece of land. Just having the walls in place is already helping the area feel a lot more complete. As for the farms themselves, I first want to turn one into a giant wheat and carrot field. So first, I headed over to our current wheat farm and harvested the entire thing with our Fortune 3 hoe to get as many seeds as possible. And we have a carrot farm in between our villager trading hall and windmill, so let's also harvest that one as well. With plenty of seeds and carrots in hand, I went over to the new farm area and did some basic terraforming to prep the land. Next up, I placed mangrove roots wherever I needed water sources. And I did my best to hide them under the walls whenever possible. That way they keep everything hydrated without taking up valuable crop space, and it just looks cleaner overall. Let's waterlog them all now so that our crops will stay hydrated. Now let's use our hoe again to turn the ground into farmland. Finally, I planted all of our wheat and carrots in big alternating rows. Once it all grows in, I think it's going to look really cool. While we wait for it to grow, let's get started on gathering all the materials we're going to need for the second farm, which I want to be for sugarcane. Taking a trip to our moss farm first, let's grab a few stacks of both regular and pale moss. We're obviously going to need some sugarcane to, build a sugarcane farm, so let's head over to our farming district to get some. As you can see, our current setup is really not that big, so making a new one is kind of essential. Anyways, that's everything that we'll need, so just like the last one, let's begin by doing some basic terraforming to prep the area. With the land ready to go, let's dig out spots for water, and I'm going for a diagonal pattern just to make it a bit more interesting. After digging all the holes, I filled them in with mangrove roots, which I then waterlogged. And to hide the roots, I covered them with moss carpet. All that was left to do at this point was to plant the sugarcane. Don't have nearly enough to fill the whole farm in yet, but we'll get there eventually. Also, check out our wheat and carrots now. You can really start to see what I meant by the alternating rows. The next area I want to work on is this open space near the dock, so in preparation, let's get a few items together we're going to need, like tough blocks and both cobbled and regular deep slate. We're also going to need basalt, copper grates, as well as some kelp blocks. That should be it, so let's begin by removing the ground to make room for a brand new pathway. Perfect, we've got that all cleared out, so let's get the actual path in place. And this one is completely different than any of our others, as I wanted to go for a stone-looking pathway instead of our typical dirt ones. For some extra detail, let's add short grass, ferns, and even a few buttons to resemble small rocks. At the moment, there's no good way to get from the top of the wall down to the dock, so let's fix that by building a proper staircase for easy access. That's so much better. Now that we're down here though, I can't help but notice how empty the dock is, so let's fix that by adding some copper grates, which to me look like crab cages. And to accompany those, we can place down some dried kelp blocks for even more decoration. Continuing with the goal of easy access, let's place some ladders on a few of the dock's pillars to make it possible to get from the water up onto the dock platform. And let's also add a ladder on the wall next to our lighthouse, as it just feels natural to me to have one here for some reason. While building those ladders, I noticed a spot that's quite shallow beside our dock. So to make room for future boat builds, let's take a few minutes just to lower the terrain a bit. I eventually want to terraform the entire riverbed going all the way around the island, but that's going to be a huge project. So in the meantime, if we can at least take care of problem areas like this, that should be good enough. Anyways, let's get out of the water and focus on the next project, which is going to be building 5 brand new houses to fill up this region beside our new pathway. Easier said than done though, because taking a look at the material list, it's easily the biggest one from this entire series yet. I guess that means we have no time to waste, so let's lock in and begin the grind. In our storage room, I began to craft everything I was able to, like anvils, blackstone stairs, campfires, and cherry planks. And I'm not gonna bore you by showing every single item, but I searched through all of my chests, and honestly, it's looking like I'm going to have a lot of the stuff I need already in here. It's just gonna be a matter of organizing it all and turning raw materials into the blocks we're actually going to need. For example, we need a lot of different types of stripped logs, so we can just go ahead and strip them down now, so when it comes to actually building the houses, we don't have to worry about it. And after spending close to an hour straight in our storage room, I think I've exhausted our supplies, so we're gonna have to go out to collect the last of the materials. Before we get too carried away though, let's place down some copper blocks outside so they can age. While we wait, let's chop down some dark oak trees. And I just grew them right away with some bone meal since I'm too impatient to wait. With a few stacks of logs gathered up, I used the wood to craft slabs, stairs, and trapdoors. Next, let's head down underground and mine up some tough blocks. I grabbed a fair amount of extra as well, just since it's a block that I use all the time. Back at the surface, I used our elytra to go back to the warm ocean we went to at the start of the video. This time though, I have my eyes set on gathering up some brain and bubble coral blocks. We don't need a whole lot, so I was able to collect enough in a few minutes, and then I made my way back home. When I got there, I checked in on our copper and waxed and collected all the ones that were at the second stage of oxidation. I then turned it into some waxed, exposed copper grates. It took 7 shulker boxes, which is kind of crazy, but we now have all the materials to build the new houses. Getting straight to building, I made the foundation of the first house using coral mixed with stone bricks. The spruce addiction is still very much real, so most of the smaller details are made using that, and then for the second floor, I tried using netherrack mixed with mangrove to make red walls. As for the roof, I used deep slate with a bit of black stone mixed in. Getting to the smaller details, I added saplings and flowers inside of the flower pots. And we might as well add some flowers to fill out this empty grass patch too while we're at it. I built a small cover on the side of the building, so let's use a couple beehives, a lantern, and chest to fill out the space below it. After adding more flowers at the front, I placed a hanging sign above the entrance. I think it'd be fun to eventually build some type of shop in here and then put the name of the store on the sign. And with just one house done, this area is already feeling so much more fun to walk through. Before we get started on building the next house, let's take a minute to check in on our sugarcane farm. I harvested the entire thing and then used what I got to get the rest of the farm filled in. Okay, with that chore done, no more distractions, let's get back to building. For the next house, I built the first floor using stone bricks, regular stone, and gravel. Then I moved up to the second floor using spruce, dark oak, and mangrove wood. I did include a large window design though to help break up the shape and just make it feel a bit more open. For the roof, I stuck with dark oak stairs, but used fence gates underneath to help smooth out the roof line and add a bit of depth. And finally, I included a chimney made out of darker blocks so it looks a little charred, like it's actually been used. To detail the front of the house, I added a lantern and then built a cozy little planter box using podzol and acacia trapdoors, which I filled with the new bush block for a pop of green. Moving to the back of the build, I first put some blue orchids in the overhead flower pots. I also made a small bush in front of the window using leaf blocks, added a couple more lanterns for extra lighting, and placed down a bit of short grass to help blend everything more naturally into the environment. These first two houses complement each other perfectly, and since we already have all the blocks, we might as well get started on house number 3. To switch this one up, I went for just a single floor. I used granite, packed mud, dirt, and light gray terracotta for the walls, and I constructed a simple roof using black stone. For some color, I think a couple rose bushes will work perfectly. And to fill out the space, a small wood pile using my go-to design of oak logs and campfires will do the trick. Hopping over to the back, I built another planter box, this time using bamboo trapdoors. And I decided to fill it with sweet berries. And like earlier, I used more short grass to blend everything together. I think you probably get the style that I'm going for by now, so let's grind out the next two houses and get this project finished. First up, I went with a subtle pink palette using white terracotta, cherry wood, and mushroom stems. For the final house, I switched things up with a much darker theme. I alternated dark oak and birch to create a nice Tudor-style pattern, which adds some great contrast to the rest of the builds. I absolutely love how this street turned out. It's super detailed and really immersive to walk through. But with that, I think it's about time for us to update our map and tour everything that we've built this episode. Alright, here we are in our starter house. You can see this is what our island was looking like at the start of this episode. This entire region just completely blank, and now it's full of builds. So let's not stall any further and just grab this down, and you can see, holy cow, look how much stuff is on there now. That is so sick. Let's put that back up there, boom. But just look how cool this like network of paths is. It just looks so epic. I don't know, I could just look at this thing forever. Okay, I think that's about enough looking at the map for one episode, but just while we're in our house here, I did want to take a minute to add some of the armor trims we found to our armor. I was thinking that we could add the eye armor trim to our chest plate here. I think that'll look really cool. And then we can also add, what is this, the spire armor trim to our leggings, which is also looking pretty cool. Let's throw them on and see how they look. Okay, yeah, I'm happy with that. Especially the chest plate looks super awesome. I think that's enough messing around though. Let's finally go take a look at all the stuff that we built this episode. And before we even get too far away from our starter house, we did expand this potato farm down here. Only took a few minutes to do, but it fits the space a lot better now, so I'm glad we took the time to do that. Heading further down the pathway, we now have this massive junction where there's basically 4 different paths that we can choose from. The first one here takes us over to the farming district. Not gonna go down there right now since we didn't build it in this episode, but this next pathway does take us over to the new farms that we built. So if we take a right here, this is our brand new sugarcane farm. Pretty cool, it's actually all grown in now so you can get a good look at it. And this moss carpet, while looking cool, also stops mobs from spawning, so this farm is actually pretty safe. Heading across the pathway here, this is how we get over to our wheat and carrot farm. This one is also all grown in now and it's looking super sweet with the alternating rows. Let's head down the third pathway here. This one gives us a great view of the forest that we built. Had a lot of fun building this one, and especially just adding all the vegetation to the bottom just makes this area feel so lush and so fun to walk through. Speaking of lush, check out our awesome flower field. This thing is super colorful, super fun to walk by, really just added a lot of color and life to the area. I've really been enjoying adding smaller details like this little bench here. Doesn't really serve any functional purpose, but it just adds a nice little detail to look at as we're running around our base doing stuff. Heading past the flower field, let's head down into the harbor as we have quite a few things to look at down here. The first of which is this brand new market stall that we made. It's a pretty simple design, but I think all the little details really came together and it looks pretty, kind of like balanced in a way. On the other side of the market stall, we of course have the fountain that we made. I guess it's not really a fountain considering there's no running water, but I didn't really know what else to call it, and I really like the use of glazed terracotta at the bottom here. Just turned out super sweet and gave the build a nice little pop of color. And we also added all these little, barrels and other little decorations to help fill out the space, and overall I'm really happy with the state of the harbor now. Even added another tree there. Overall just looks super sweet. What's even more sweet in my opinion though is this view of the 5 brand new houses that we made. I think this red one at the end is my favorite. I know it maybe looks a little crazy with the netherrack in there, but I think if you take a few steps back it all kind of blends together and actually looks pretty good. And I did my best to add lots of little details like this little cover here. Even the chimney itself has lots of texture variation. And I pushed the houses really close to the edge of the kind of retaining wall for the dock here, just so that it's kind of cozy, tucked away, really immersive and fun to walk through. But as you can see, all the houses still need interiors. I'm not exactly sure what I want to do for the interiors, so I think I'm just going to kind of, think on that for a while and come back to them. But overall, these houses all just came out super cool, super fun to put these together, and they just really helped fill out this region. And I also like that it added maybe a bit of storytelling as to where the harbor workers are actually living inside of our world. Not crazy into lore, but it is fun to just add those tiny bits of storytelling. And I think this house at the other end is my second favorite. I really like the contrast between the dark oak and the birch, just created a really nice effect. And you can see I also added this jut out using soul sand. I've just been experimenting with a lot of different blocks lately, and I think this actually tied in pretty well. Ending where it all began, we have our coupe here. This build is kind of on the simpler side, but I am still happy with it. The one thing I maybe would change is using trapdoors for the kind of fence, because for some reason the chicken AI just kind of makes them all go to the very edge. But besides that, I think it's pretty cool. I really hope you enjoyed this new expansion to our island. I had a lot of fun working on this one. And as always, if you want to explore the world for yourself, you can get the world download on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and happy building!